This first section is how to avoid a misunderstanding or fight. And the reason that I chose to start the entire course with this communication skill is because miscommunication is a waste of time. So the idea is that if you can avoid a miscommunication in the first place, you'll be able to save a lot of time and headaches at the back end. A lot of times people find themselves trying to have a productive conversation about something and then actually really completely shocked when it turns into an argument. So it may seem completely arbitrary whether or not a dialogue is going to go south, but the truth is that it's actually not. Communication happens in predictable patterns, which is why we can prevent them. Miscommunication is predictable and avoidable. Although it might seem to happen out of nowhere, research teams have spent an immense amount of time gathering data about what makes conversations productive and what makes them counterproductive. So there are warning signs you can look out for, and there are very minor and subtle changes you can make that will bring an entire conversation in a better direction. So I truly believe that prevention is better than intervention. So in the next lecture, we're going to be talking about what makes communication fail. So in this lecture, we're going to be looking at what makes communication fail. And in order to understand how to prevent conflict, we need to understand what makes communication fail in the first place. For the purpose of this part of the communication course, I'll be drawing from the research of Drs. John and Julie Gottman. They are prominent in the field of relationship research, and according to the last count, they had studied over 3,000 couples over the course of 40 years. This is the body of research that I'm most familiar with because I am fortunate enough to be on their research team. And you may have heard the statistic that Dr. Gottman can predict divorce with over 90% accuracy. He's able to do this from watching the first 3 minutes of a couple having a conversation about a conflict. Now, people tend to get a little bit freaked out by this statistic because they start to worry that I'm going to tell them whether or not their relationship is doomed. But the truth is that this statistic is only true without intervention. Okay, so what that means is that people can absolutely turn things around just by understanding what's going wrong and making the necessary changes. So in their newlywed study, the Gottman team observed couples after they came back from their honeymoons and then followed them for 6 years. They spent their weekends in a lab, which was basically set up as a regular apartment. It was fitted with video cameras, and they also, had their urine taken, and they had blood samples and all of that. But really what was so crucial is that we really wanted to understand, or they wanted to understand, what happens every single day. Not only what happens when a couple's having a conflict, but what are things like on a normal Tuesday. And that's really how we learned so much about communication patterns. So we know that conversations end the way that they begin 96% of the time. What does that mean? If you start a conversation with warmth and thoughtfulness, you will likely receive warm, thoughtful responses. If you bring up something when you're rushed and irritated, you'll probably receive the same thing in return. Okay, but here's the thing that actually might blow your mind. I'm serious. Let's think about this for a second. The first 3 minutes of a conversation not only predict the way the last 3 minutes of that conversation will go, but those 3 minutes ultimately predict how well the overall relationship will go. Okay, so here we have the 6 predictors of divorce. And these are the factors we look for when assessing a relationship. Notice the first item on this list is called a harsh startup. We used to think that relationships failed because of things like affairs or different values, but here it is in black and white. The way you start a conversation with people with whom you disagree has an immense influence over whether or not you're happy in that relationship on a long-term basis. What I'm going to do is I'm going to teach you the prevention strategy for this harsh startup. And so in the next lecture, I'll be teaching you Gottman's gentle startup formula. And it's not just taking a deep breath before you start talking. A lot goes into how to do this right. And I'll be walking you through the formula step by step. It's super easy, but it is important that you follow each step. In this lecture, we are going to be learning how to avoid a misunderstanding or fight. This is when we're really getting down to the nuts and bolts of what to say and how to say it when there's something sensitive that you need to bring up and you really want it to go well. And the way we're going to do that is we are going to use John Gottman's soft startup formula. This is the alternative to the harsh startup that we talked about before. And this is the way to start any kind of conversation that you think might be potentially difficult. So here's the formula put all together. I feel blank about blank, and I need or request blank. Notice that most often people stop after the first stanza. I felt hurt when you said what you said. Okay. And then what happens is if you stop there, then the listener is going to likely want to defend why he or she did or said what they did or said versus continuing to talk. So not to stop there, but to continue to talk and to put forward your need or your request so that you really get your listener's attention and that they're motivated to be understanding, oh, this person is having an experience and there might be something concrete I can do to help, which is a really great way to start the conversation in a way that is positive. So step 1, state your emotion clearly and succinctly. I feel annoyed. It seems super simple, right? However, it's amazing how tricked up we can get in this step. Because very often we start a sentence with the words, I feel, but really what comes after the word feel isn't usually an emotion. So for example, the wrong way, I feel that you don't care about me. I feel like nothing I do matters. I feel as if we're spinning our wheels. Notice, yes, the sentence starts with those two words, I feel, but really what's going on the right side of the slide is that people are talking about their opinions or they're providing an analysis. They're not emotions. They're thoughts or opinions or rants. So the way to get around that is to really stay with one feeling. So I feel blank. I feel disconnected. I feel frustrated. By the way, if you're in a business environment, you don't have to talk about feeling sad, right? You can feel something like, I'm feeling concerned that this project isn't going to be completed. So not all emotions have to be mushy, but they do need to be clear if you're going to be using this the way that it's intended. Okay, I want to point something out to you. Prepositions are not your friend when you're using this tool. One really great way to notice that you're not speaking about an emotion is prepositions. I feel that you don't care about me. I feel like nothing I do matters. Okay, I feel as if. And when we get to the practice portion later, you'll notice that when you write things down, then you're much more likely to be able to catch if you're going in the other direction toward thoughts. Okay? Step 2, describe what is happening objectively and without blame. So moving along, I feel annoyed when I come home to a cluttered house. Nice and clear. And you notice that that's really different than complaining about what the other person did. You're describing what's happening to you. So do your best to avoid using the word you when you're doing step 2. I come home to a cluttered house is a lot less triggering than you leave your clothes all over the house and just assume I'm going to clean them up after you yet again. It's really easy to go there, just not that helpful. Okay. Step 3, ask for what you need clearly and in a behavioral term. So what you're doing is you're asking for help. Please try to remember to put away your clothes and dishes. Very simple. Versus, please stop disrespecting me in our home and leaving your belongings all over the place. So in other words, you'll notice that on the left, you're talking about what you do want instead of talking about what you don't want. A lot of times in my office, I can't tell you how many times I just say, well, what's the opposite of that? I need you to stop, blah, blah, blah. Okay, well, what's the opposite of that? The opposite of being late is being on time. The opposite of being disrespectful is speaking with kindness. And there's some mental gymnastics that have to happen in order to do this. That's the point, right? That we're slowing down and taking the time to do those mental gymnastics with language. And that's why these are teachable skills. We're really just talking about what are the words that are coming out of our mouth before we say them, thinking before we speak. So when you put it all together, I feel annoyed when I come home to a cluttered house, and I need you to please try to remember to put your clothes and dishes away. And that is a soft startup. Step 4, pepper your soft startup with appreciations and manners. So wherever you can, you want to look to just find a way to point out that you notice what the person is doing. Especially when we're giving feedback about something sensitive, it's going to land a lot better when that person feels like, wow, you like me, you care about me. There's just this one little thing you wish was different, right? You think I'm great overall, but you want me to put my dishes away, which is so much easier to handle because as human beings, we don't like hearing feedback. So if you can sandwich it with some positives and some appreciations, that will go a long way, even though it can feel a little bit paradoxical, right? Like, why am I saying nice things to this person when they're doing something I don't like? Well, because they're not all bad. They do good things and things that they could improve, like all of us. Okay, so now in the next section, we are going to be practicing everything that we've learned with actual real life examples. Okay, thanks. Okay, so in this section, we are going to be putting everything we've learned into practice. And the way we're going to do this is I'm going to give you some scenarios. I want you to pretend that you are in that scenario, even if you don't have a brother or a daughter, and go ahead and use the soft startup formula. I will put it up so that you can refer to it. Also, with something like this, with the practice sections, it's always a good idea to pause if you need to, rewind to go take a look at the different things that we've learned. So basically, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to give you a scenario, and the first one is that your brother said he would walk your dog while you are at work, but he has been forgetting to lock the door when he leaves. Remember, just 1 or 2 sentences max. Okay, the second scenario is that your teenage daughter is in the habit of leaving dirty dishes on the counter. You do not want to get into a huge fight with her, but it is something that you would like to bring up with her. And the third scenario is a business one. Your colleague has not completed her portion of the team project. The project is due in 2 days. Of course, you don't want to get into an argument about this. You want a nice, clean conversation about it so that you can move forward efficiently. And finally, what I'd like you to do is think of a real life situation with somebody that you know. Think about something that probably isn't the biggest source of conflict between the two of you, but something that is real that you'd like to talk about. It's up to you whether or not you use this, in real life, but it's a great idea to figure out how you would do it using your own voice in a real relationship. Okay, now go ahead and check your work. Number 1, is you're feeling one clear emotion, or are there prepositions there, meaning that you're talking about thoughts or opinions? Also, is your description specific and neutral without blaming? Did you make one and only one behavioral request? And did you use your manners and appreciations, really coming forward as if this is somebody that you really like and that you expect is going to be meeting your request? That kind of optimism tends to translate into motivation. Just a little side note. Okay, great. So now my request of you is that I would really love it if you would go ahead and add your soften startup to the comment section. The reason I ask that is so that we can all take a look and give feedback to one another in a non-critical way. It's really great to hear other people's ideas, especially with some of the scenarios that are the same. So that's the end of this section. There's a test afterwards if you like to take it. And the next section is how to respond to criticism. Thanks so much.